Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Cameron DeYoung, and I'm the Digital Marketing Manager at EMDs, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. In today's Practice Partner Lunch and Learn, we're going to review enterprise prescribing. Before I hand the presentation over to Susie to get us started, there are some housekeeping items to quickly go over. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available to everyone after the event. You'll receive an email with a link to the presentation slides as well as instructions on how to access the recording. All attendee lines are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the Q&A or chat tools to submit them to the team. We'll handle all questions at the end of the presentation. If time does not permit and we're not able to get to your questions during the live session, we'll make sure to follow up with you directly after the webinar. On your screen, you should be able to see the slides for today's presentation. To view a full screen mode of the presentation, please click the arrow icon in the top right-hand corner of the presentation screen, and that will maximize your view of the presentation. That's all from me, and now I'll turn it over to Susie for more on enterprise prescribing. Thank you, Susie.
Thanks, Cameron. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started on this. I wanted to kind of give you a review, and I've broken down screens and that kind of stuff to maybe make it easier to start getting your providers and everybody familiar with what they're going to see once we get into 11.2 in Enterprise. Short little plug here for Practice Partner User Conference coming up in June, the 20th through the 22nd. This year it's in Austin. So if it's something that you'd like to do, put it on your plans, and we'd love to see you there. Lots of stuff coming down and new and exciting stuff. Today's agenda, we're going to go ahead and, again, review some prescriber management access, prescribing agents, prescribe medication screen, modify medication screen, record medication screen, talk a lot about Succinct RX worklist, medication window, view screen, and pharmacy management. So we're going to go ahead and start with a prescriber management overview on this. And we're into beta for a little while now, about a month in there, and got some more coming onto it. So as always with beta, you learn things that as they come along. So that's where I'm kind of wanting to relay that back to you to better prepare you once you make this move. With the prescriber management window, you're going to use this screen to set up providers for electronic prescribing and non-controlled substances, or the EPCS window on that. So it's a change from what we had before by doing it in a support site. The EPCS includes the ability, obviously, to send non-controlled and controlled substances information that comes through. You may or may not have it on your site yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit as it comes onto it. If this is something you're going to do, it's not required to go EPCS. And then basically to understand that right now, once you migrate to 11.2, your providers who already exist in the database and have existing electronic prescribing capability will retain that capability once you go into Enterprise. So it's not something that you'd have to go back and then re-enroll them. It's already going to exist there once we get that migrated. So this prescriber management screen is found under your maintenance menu, setup, and prescriber management, right? In this window here, it'll be new once you get upgraded there and to be able to launch it. And this is what this window looks like. So basically, once you get migrated on that and then you go through the installation, which the next session further on in April, we're going to do a deep dive into that total installation process information that comes on. This information, your providers associated with the specific practices in the database will automatically populate into this prescriber management window. And that information will pull in. It's going to pull in the SPI information in from your practice records 2 tab, information set up into it. And then the ID proofing and the EPCIS, if it's already set up, it's going to go ahead and show that it's set up. If not, then you would have an invite button to be able to go ahead and get them enrolled. And that's where, once you did that migration, that's where you're going to start enrolling providers through that, through this window right within the software instead of going through the support site information. So then once you do get that, your providers will come in, and that's why with that existing providers already set in the database, they'll go ahead and migrate over there. And if they already are set up, then it's going to go ahead and show in that window and have the capability to be able to start using the system without having to go back and redo information. So on the left-hand side of this window, you can see that it pulls from my provider list, setup information, and there again, the providers have to be associated with a practice in the practice too to show up in this window. That shows up into that. So it's just going to go ahead and show up there and document information that pulls in. The SPI information is going to go and pull from the SureScripts ID that exists into the General 2 tab of the practice setup. So that's what's listed on the right-hand side of the screen is what you'll see once you, information that pulls into that. So that's where that information is pulling from, and then it's going to associate it with practice PMSI. Your main practice, I should say, not mine. All right, in the window information that pulls in, like I said, is on migration. Existing providers will populate into this window. Providers who associate with multiple practices will come in with an SPI to the defaulted practice and a registered button to create another SPI for the practice. Now, I've kind of presented this before, but I want to go over it again because it's important to understand that if you have a practice, if you have multiple practices set up in your database now, and you have the same provider set up in multiple practices, if you went in and added an SPI into each one of those practices, this is where once Enterprise comes in, you can only have one SPI per provider per practice. So that's where this information that shows up. So prior to the migration, we built in a utility to help with that process, but it's still to understand that prior to going into migration that if you've got multiple, if you have the same SPI set up to the same provider in multiple practices, that's something that will have to change because once you go through this, it'll be necessary to go back and register and get separate SPIs for each one of those practices in order to be able to, for the provider to log into the separate practice and then send out the e-prescribing information. In the next window that I'm showing is also what's changed is, so writing this information here, is moving forward after you do the migration, you'll still go in and enter new providers into the provider setup, just as we've always done. But when we get to into the practice information, we're going to want to add them into the practice, just like what you're seeing here. But the SureScripts ID is grayed out. So before, up until you move over to the new 11.2, you could go in and you would get that SPI number and you just go ahead and manually enter it into this window. Once we go to Enterprise, that opportunity goes away. It's grayed out, so you can't come in and manually enter that information because what's going to happen now is that once you set up a provider, set the provider maintenance, then you add them to the practice. Once you do this, this is going to stay blank until you go to the prescriber management window and hit the register. And then when that SPI is then generated through prescriber management, it will come back and populate back into this window. So that's the difference information that pulls into this. So you can see right here in the screen below where I've got my provider set up. I have her set up affiliated with my practice. I don't have an SPI number. I've got all my other information I needed set up in here. And then when I come back into my prescriber management window, she exists there, and it shows that she's associated with PMSI, and then there's a register button over to the right, which then I would go ahead and click. And what it does is it goes out to the ACME database, and it matches up with the SureScripts information, and then it's going to go ahead and populate back into this gray area and populate back into this window here. So that information all has to add up into that. So that whole workflow has changed. Your existing providers will be defaulted into there, but new providers coming on after you've done this, it's going to be that process of going out and getting that set up. We won't have to have that ability to go back in and manually enter that information. As far as the ID proofing goes, once you've set them up, you've got to have two invite buttons. One invite button for the ID proofing, which is going to be non-controlled substances, non-controlled scheduled medications, and then the other one would be the EPCS. So it'll be a matter of entering in the information with a email, and then the phone number would pull from your practice information that's set up, and then it's going to go ahead and submit and get that information back out to be able to get that enrollment and then come back into the system information. So again, I'll just kind of say that if prior to going to with the ID proofing now, if you've got providers who maybe you've been thinking about going with the EPCS, but you just haven't made that leap yet, but it's something that they would want to do, prior to going to Enterprise, if you got all that set up and got all of their information set up to be able to do that, then when you migrate, it would already automatically been updated for the ID proofing. And it kind of trickles down. The EPCS comes first. In other words, you go through all that ID proofing and get all that information, then it could trickle down into the ID proofing. So you don't have to, if you did that first, then it's going to go ahead and migrate down. If you already had that set up in your database, then once you do the go to 11.2, then that would automatically be updated for you and everything else. Doing it post that could be, it's just going to be a whole other process on that. So it's just a thought, a food for thought on that, as if somebody is thinking about doing this, to possibly think about getting them updated now and moving forward with that. It could make things a little bit easier. All right, so the next window in this is prescriber management. Again, I just wanted to kind of show you what was, and this is what we have now, where we can hand enter information, and then you could go in and you enroll through EPCS through that, through this little window here that we had in the Rec and General 2 tab. Once we go, you're going to have this new window where everything's going to be controlled between prescriber management window and then the ACME database. Okay, so now when we go to prescriber management access, there's a few things that to just understand that, because it's just basically what we have now is you have access level set up and we have everything coming into the inbox. So let's say I got nurse over here and she's got access level and she manages all my incoming refill requests and all that kind of stuff coming in. And she also gets, or somebody gets, those errors that also come in from SureScripts. And that was dictated by the RX Hub configurations utility. So we can forget about that configuration utility now. That's going away. But there's some steps on there that dictated where those messages came, because we could go in and we could set up a provider, and then we could say we want his messages to go into this inbox. And we also have an admin box. So we still have that. The only thing on the RX config is going to kind of dictate the EPCS audit report information that pulls in. But now people with prescriber management access levels will receive, are the ones that can receive errors into their inbox for prescriptions that are an error of some sort that comes in. Those will still come to the review bin. And then, but you're also going to want somebody that can go into prescriber management. So we set up, there's a setting that you can add into the RX key and the ppart.ini file, and it's basically set up for prescriber management and administrators. Now we're going to have that coming out, so most of the time, by the time you go live, it should already be into your ppart.ini file. If not, you can add information, and then it's going to equal. And then you can have, I just used an example on here of Bob and Dave, but you would have whoever you wanted to be able to administer prescriber management, meaning going in and managing the setup information and so forth, versus having everybody have tons of stuff coming into their inbox. So that's going to be set up on there that you can have into it, and then you can dictate who you want to have those errors go into a certain inbox versus having them go to possibly everybody that maybe have this administrator access level information that comes on. So it kind of tears down as to where that's going to come into it. The bottom part of it would be an issue if you didn't have anybody set up with prescriber management access. Now, once you install prescriber management access, would go ahead and be assigned to your admin high level. But again, we've already had sites, and like I've said, is that a lot of people with partner for many years have got multiple access levels, and they set up different levels of high and RN and anything else that they're going to do on that nursing. And so by default, it'll go to that high, the out-of-the-box high, but once you get upgraded, you'll want to check on that. But then this setting here is going to help control where those errors and that information goes, and then who gets into. Not everybody needs to get into prescriber management to be able to enroll providers and that kind of thing there. So that's where that access levels is pulling into it. And again, it's going to be once you download, a lot of that may already be done on that, but it's just good to be aware of it. All right. Basically, the other thing is what I just kind of want to talk about. We did add some functionality through the beta process about having multiple providers set up with multiple practices and information that comes onto it. So really the existing SPI, I'm just going to say it again, is that you can only have one SPI per a provider. We can't have that same provider set up in 5 different practices with the same SPI. Also with your practices, there's an issue with address information as well associated to it. So again, prior to the migration, just understand and know where this is and how that's going to work. If you've got that set up and you've got multiple SPIs set up, make sure that you only have the one SPI for one provider for the practice that they're going to work in mostly, or when I say the default practice, the one they log into it prior to the migration. And so that's just going to help through the whole migration process and the reconciliation down the road, information that comes in, and then you can go back in and get them set up. So I just wanted to kind of add that in there, information into it so that you can see it. Here's where the prescriber management access levels are, found through the general tab and the prescriber management. You've got the view and the edit. So there again, not everybody may want the ability to edit. They can just, if they want to go in there, they can view it, then that information that goes through. So you have control on either one of those. So this is just a kind of documentation, again, is those errors that come in. We have it now, so you get a prescription that comes into your, or a request, I should say, from the pharmacy that comes into the inbox, and they can't match the patient up due to possibly a different name, something or others not kicking it in so that it recognizes that patient when it gets into partner. And so at the workflow now is all you can do is either go up and open up the chart and then renew that process right from the window, which is what you're still going to have to do on that. I've just seen errors come in that they can't match up the patient. And so with Enterprise, what we're seeing is that it comes in and the pharmacies automatically denying those prescriptions because they can't match up. So all you would have to do, again, at this point, it's going to come into the inbox of the person who has that level of prescription management and then dictated by that ppart.ini file that they put into that. So it would probably be your nursing staff or somebody at that extent. They're going to get that. And then that information, so if the patient exists in the database and they want to refill that medication, they would have to go into, it doesn't link into the messages, so they would have to manually go into that chart and then do a refill from the medication window and get it back out, information that pulls in. So this is just errors on that to understand, and you will see those when you come into it and start being able to have them to manage them. But the process is it can't link up to anybody because it can't recognize the patient, and so it can't link up back up to the work list or anything. And we have some of that now when they couldn't link up information. The other thing to understand with the prescriber management access is that, so if you have a provider that's set up that has prescriber management access, and let's say that they're set up as a provider, the little box that says this provider is the above provider checked, and you give them high access, if they were to go in and try to get into prescriber management as a provider, they're going to get this error here. It won't allow them to do that. So they're going to have to use another user. So you really need an admin level that can go in and manage that prescriber management access. If the provider is the management, you'd need another way for an admin login for them to get in to be able to do it and not have that box checked that says this is the above provider, so that they get that information. So that's what I'm saying, is have an admin that would be able to, an admin login that be able to go in and get into that prescriber management access. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the prescribing agent. So a lot of prescribing stuff goes on in Enterprise, prescribing everything. So the prescribing agent is not prescribing management, and it's easy to get those two things mixed up or backwards information that pulls in, but the prescribing agent is used to link users up to the provider in order for them to process medications for that provider. So it's the same process we have now, where we have nursing staff that are set up with access levels, to be able to go in and send medications, process medications, and so forth. But what has changed is that there's no longer the ability to, we don't have the signatures set up anymore where they have to sign off on signatures or anything else, but it requires a login information that it requires the access levels to be able to edit the medication window, do a new edit, delete information. They have to have that access levels, which they will when you go to migrate. And so what shows up in this window when you go into it will be all the users that have that access. And so what we did is we added a new button here under Maintenance and Providers, and it's under the Records tab under RX Agents. So it'll be necessary to go in and take your users, operators, and then be able to move them into be able to be prescribing agents for specific providers. So providers can manage prescriptions for others, but you have to go in there and get that set up and cross-reference that to be able to do it, to be able for them to go ahead and manage that. So it's, again, once you do get the migration done and go into it, you'll want to get this set up right away so users can go back in and be able to manage and process those medications for those specific providers, and Enterprise recognizes that they are set up to be able to authorize agents, I guess is a good word to put it. So one thing to understand about that too is that if I'm logged in, so in this example, okay, I logged in as PMSI, and I went in and set up my users for my Dr. Best. Well, I don't see my name anywhere. And the reason is because it's set up that way so that it's kind of a control thing information that if I'm logged in as PMSI, I can't just automatically assign myself to a provider. I'm not going to see that information. The same on example 2, if I logged in as this other user, I don't see that user's name as well. So if you want, as an administrator, if you need to get yourself set up so that you can go in and see this kind of information and do that, you would, again, have to log in as a different user. If you logged in as yourself or as a PMSI in this example, when I go to link my providers, my name isn't going to be there. So I have to go in and an admin, a different admin, log into it. The idea would be, I guess, you know, just so that you just can't just go and assign yourself to everything else. But what I want you to understand is if you go in there and to do that, how come I can't sign myself in? And it's because it needs kind of a little checks and balance on that. So that's just a thing on the prescribing agent. If you're logged in as an admin and you want to assign yourself, you'll have to have another access to be able to log in as another possible admin login, and then be able to put that information into it so you can see that you're there in order to manage those. And it might, you know, again, it's certain types. On the beta side, so a lot of the admins were logged in so they could kind of help and see what was going on there. Not so much that they were going to process medications. In a small practice, you might be doing all of it. So just understand that when you go in. That's why I'm not seeing myself, is because I'm logged in to be able to do that, to be able to change through. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to some of the new screen information on that. And more or less, I set this up a little bit so you, like I said, you can utilize it maybe to train end users a little more. Than we'll do some more technical stuff in the next Lunch and Learn. But what this one is to kind of give an overview to be able to train at the end user level versus deep down inside of technical. So, and the next new window is going to be Allergy Management Screen. What we knew and had was this window right here, which you're seeing under Allergies New. It gets replaced by this Allergy Management window. And same concept, I access it through the allergy button inside the medication window, and now this information will pull in. The existing allergies will go ahead and pull over. And then it's just a matter of going in and using the search allergies to do new, and using the free text, or using the free text information. You have a choice to be able to do that. But searching allergies has a drill down that you can start typing information, and then it's going to go ahead and add that information right into your allergies. You can add multiple ones with this new window. You can edit them right with this little edit window that comes onto it, and remove them if need to be. But the allergies do work very similar to what they did in 11, with our window change a little bit, and then a little bit easier streamlined information that pulled through. Your dot codes still work. You can insert allergies, and you can push back down into the allergy, same dot codes that we had previously. All right, so we're going to move into our prescribed medication window. So what I'm finding is, as I'm learning it again, is that part of it is just understanding what window I'm in and what kind of features I have to be able to do on it. The prescribed medication window really replaces the new template window that we had. So now when we go in and we hit new and our template window shows up, and we can search by our Medispend database, or we can search by templates. So that information pulls in, and it pulls in whatever default and an NDC number, just like what you're seeing here, and then we can document the take form and so forth right from this template. With the prescription medication and enterprise, that replaces all of that workflow, but the concept is pretty much still the same on there as far as entering information that comes into it. So this is what the new prescribed medication looks like. So we still go into medication window and we click new. Or you click up to the icon that you can do the RX medication, and it's still going to go ahead and open up this window. So this has just replaced that old window that we had, information that comes in. The information pulls up, and we have the ability to do a search by drug name, class, or DME. And then we have an input search that we can go ahead and start documenting information. You also have a free text medication over to the right. One thing that, again, that I'll tell you that, and we've had, again, sometimes people are creatures of habit and they go ahead and start using that text. But one thing to keep in mind is if I'm using text information, it's not really interacting with the database anymore. I also can't send electronic prescriptions using text. So you really want to get focused on using this database to be able to pull up your medication and push it down so that you can go ahead and send those out electronically versus using that text information that pulls into it. So it really replaced, basically the screen is replacing the RX text and the Medispend drug database that we've got used to. So that's, by utilizing this new method, you're replacing that old workflow function, information that's going to come in. And as we had with the Medispend, we could go ahead and search by a medication, search by information, and we had the drug at the top. At the bottom, we had a mixture of drugs, brands, classifications, a generic information, and you could go ahead and choose that medication from the bottom part of the window. So what's now, though, is the same as the drug search. If I search by this same medication that we looked at before, I could type in Advair, and it's going to start drilling down until I find the medication that I want. And then that medication is going to go ahead and give me a list of the drug name and generic information here that I can go ahead and select. My formulary is going to be over on the right. And then my route information is going to pull in. So the requirement would be to go ahead and select one of these, whatever medication that you want, information that pulls on. And then again, in this case, it's going to go ahead, and once I select it, it's going to look at the formulary, and it is going to check for alternatives for the brand name that I went ahead and set up in here to be able to pull through. When this window pops up, I can skip it, or I can keep on letting it go, so then it's going to go ahead and give me more options to be able to select from. And here comes the more options I have on that formulary information that I can go ahead and utilize. So there's been a little bit of confusion, again, from coming from the template version to coming to this is possibly the dose information, different wording that comes into that. So you may see kind of some of that comes through to it. But this is the choice to come in. They select this. They could, from this window, go ahead and go, wait a minute, I'm not sure what I'm looking for, go back to previous information that comes through, or they could even say, I'm just going to select my original, because that was still in the formulary as well. That's what I want to choose, and the original is going to go ahead and say right up here in this top window as to what it is. And if I keep the original, it's going to go ahead and select this medication. I don't have to select anything down below it. Information in, or if I select one of the alternatives, it's kind of like the Medispend. I selected what I wanted, and then I click that button right over here to select alternative, and it's going to go ahead and then populate that medication into my prescribed medication window, just like what you're seeing when it comes back into here. So it's just kind of a process to going out, information that pulls out, that they went ahead and selected, it's going to go ahead and pull into it. So once this medication pulls in, I've selected a dose that comes into it. I can always, it's kind of behind my little window down here, but there is a previous button down below in the left-hand corner if they need to go back on that. But once it pops into it, it's going to go ahead and bring that signature that you chose, that medication that was chosen. You can always, providers can always come in here and they can change this if they don't like the wording or they need to add information onto it. They can go ahead and select that the text information that comes onto it. I always advise them if they're going to select the text and it's something that they like the wording and it's something that, save it as a favorite, which again, the next screen shows, but the make favorites a little star down below, because that way then they don't have to the default of the signature is not going to change, but maybe it's something that they're changing or how they're writing prescriptions to be able to pull onto it. So that's going to go ahead and pull into it. The quantity is always going to be open, that you must go ahead and enter it in so that it populates your real-time benefits down below, information that pulls into it. And then this, basically the packaging or the type is this information here. And so when it pops up, I know that somebody I worked with, she kept saying, well, why does it keep saying this? Because this isn't what it is. Well, what I wanted to show you is under the package, this is why it's defaulting to what in this window here, so it's coming up with this information here, and it's because under the package sizes, this is how it's packaged. There's a drop down to change if this is what you want to change on that prescription, but this is where that default is coming from. So it's not like it was just throwing something in there. I think like Inhaler was coming back with RAMs, and once I showed her the package, I said, this is why it's coming into it. It's this package information. So just be aware of that. So if you go into it and it's not what they're used to being able to see, this is why it's showing that default information under that package. This is for information purposes only, but it's there to be able to and tie back into all that other information that you put up into the window. Of course, my pharmacy information is going to populate, which populates over to the left-hand side. And as we've seen in other webinars, information that can be updated on the fly, or I can drop down from this window here and choose another pharmacy if this is what I need to. And all my good stuff over here on the left, it's going to pull in from the chart, information that pulls into it. I have my indications that if I'm using those are going to pull from my problem list right over here to the left. And keep in mind that that list could be fairly extensive on larger databases or a lot of information coming into that, so it's populating into that window. So this is where the indication's going. You may have prescriptions that require an indication, you may not. It's going to be, again, how you utilize that or what you want to use on that. I have one provider that uses them all the time. But it just depends on what you're looking at. But that's where that's pulling from. So I can't just go into an indication and type anything I want. I don't have a lookup. It's got to be existed in the current problem list for me to associate a problem to it. The prior authorization, there's a field in here that you can type an authorization in here if this is what's needed to be able to pull from. The system doesn't have that interoperability yet to be able to bring a authorization in. But if it's something that you get into it, then this is where it can go ahead and go in. We'll see other screens in here that you can add those if it comes back from the pharmacy that they require one as well. Information pulls through. So anyway, from this window, again, from the Prescribe Medication, they have a choice to be able to save these or to send RX now. So depending on their workflow and how they're going to do this, in some sites I worked with, the nursing staff went in and they went in and they did the refills and all that stuff that they needed to get done in the in-house or the call-in refills per se. They would go in and get all this information set up, and then they saved it to push to the work list. So then the provider later came in and followed up with all that information that goes through. Or if it's a provider doing it at this point and they're ready to pull from it, they could go ahead and do the Save RX Now, which would then open up the next window. So just probably the most part is to understand, at that level, do I want to send it or do I want to push it to the work list? Either or, if it gets sent out now, it's still going to populate that Send RX window, but their choice on being able to how they're going to manage it and what workflow they're using to be able to fill those. So the Prescribe Medication window, again, I just wanted to talk about at this SIG level is you can text it. So they can modify and be text if what comes up, because basically what they're selecting is a drop-down list, and it may not be specific to how somebody writes prescriptions or how they're used to doing things. So they can come in and text that information to be able to add to it. And then again, like I said, is if it's something that, again, if they're always changing it, then it would be something to make as a favorite, and it's going to go ahead and start documenting down here in their prescribed medication window as favorites. As I've said before, favorites are user specific. So I log in as nurse and I make things favorites. That's going to always be my favorites on my enterprise window. Doctor logs in and does their thing and they make their favorites. It's going to be their favorites. So it's just a matter of making those favorites, and it's going to go ahead and list right on that prescribed medication window. And then it classifies by the alphabet that's above inside this window that they have in this prescribed medication window. That's where it's going to go ahead and reside. And so there again, if I have a whole bunch of medication under the F, I can just select my F. It's going to be highlighted to show there's data behind it, and then it's going to narrow that information down so I don't have a huge list that I'm trying to sort through there, because that can be overwhelming as well. So it's just a matter to do that. Depending on how they want to do that, you know, again, maybe make as much favorites or certain things that it seems like they're always trying to find is a good idea to make as a favorite, and then you don't have to keep on searching in that medication window. You also have the ability to send information as far as RX only. So it's defaulted to RX only when I come in. That's going to go ahead and be a prescription. I also have the ability to do an RX plus samples. So if that's the case, it's going to be maybe something that goes out and I'm going to give samples, or I'm going to have samples only. So right below in this box, I have RX samples. This is the window that's going to go ahead and populate. And there's a place for lot number. Always remember that anything in yellow is a required field. So as they're documenting information, they would have to put information in there in order to move past it. The samples will always be shown up as handwritten. So if you give samples out there, once you get to the SendRx method, it automatically defaults to handwritten. It doesn't mean that they have to write it out by hand. It's the system that's going to push back into my medication window as handwritten and completed and document those sample information that pulls on. Searching by classes, this again it's the same as the drug database. You know, in MedSpan, we kind of searched, and sometimes the classes, that information would come onto it. There was a long search information that pulled through. This allows you to go ahead and search by classes. Information will pull in. So if I start typing just a class of medication right at the very top, it's going to give me a choice. Again, the drop-down choice, what I select is then going to dictate what I see below. Information goes through, and then it is going to check and look at my formulary information that's going to pull through. So it works the same way as the drug, but it's going to be by classes versus the drug information that pulls through. And then the searching by DME, again, I can search by DME, just kind of what you have here, and then the choices information that you pull through. As I said again, is that if there's something in here that you go ahead and add, and they just add it as a free text, the most important thing is to understand is that if I set it up as a free text, I cannot send it electronically. So my suggestion would be the easiest if you can find, you know, things that they're doing, if they're constantly always writing certain things. Podiatrists, maybe I'm always, you know, doing a boot, that kind of thing in there. Make it as favorites right away, so it makes it a little bit easier, and then they can go in and find it without having to do a huge search each time. That's what's going to kind of calm down as far as the big change from what it was. We're very used to doing what we do, and then all of a sudden we're making this big change, and sometimes that gets a little bit hairy on the workflow and what I get done during the day. All right, so the next change that comes in is the modified medication screen. And this is the screen that we once knew as the edit screen. I found that this has been a big challenge on the beta side, because we were able to come into this modified medication and this edit window and change things and be able to send the prescription back out and process it that way. That is now not an option on the enterprise. And so this is one thing to kind of stress from the beginning, is the modified medication really doesn't have the functionality that we were used to in the past, the way I'm going to put it there. We can't change things. We can't anything. The only thing that this screen really works on there is, if let's say I wrote a medication for 100 milligrams, of a patient that to take on that. I can't change the dose, but in my original signature, I said take 2 capsules by route 2 times per day. If I wanted to change this to take, take 2 capsules per day, but 1 in the morning and 1 at night, I can change that script. I can change that signature, which is just going to update your medication window. It doesn't write a new script. It doesn't change that, but then it's going to be in the medication window, and the next time you go to refill it, then that signature is going to be changed there. So you can drop down and change that, but again, what we had before, we could go in and edit the medication basically and change things, information that pulls on. And this modified medication is limited to what we can do on that. So if you need to edit something, something goes out, you almost have to, you would have to maybe even discontinue it and write a new medication if you needed to completely change everything on that window that comes through on that. So just kind of keep in mind as a modified medication screen, the functionality just isn't what information that we had. So that's a change on there, but I found through the beta process that it's been a point of working. So just so that you're aware of that and know that to go ahead and address it. The record medication screen, it replaces it's basically used to record the over-the-counter medications or outside medications. And so you still have it's called record medication window, but it still looks like my prescribed medication window. My favorites are all listed below, and I can go ahead and document them as they come in. The information that pulls in, it just records into the medication window as completed, and then it sits there information that pulls onto it. Now, one thing I did find is that what we were used to having was the ability to maybe go in and update a date, change the date. Well, now if you go in and record a medication, let's say a patient presents today, and I go in and record all their medications and I put today's date in that. And then the provider comes back, maybe they're establishing care and now they want refills. If they want to come back and refill those medications, if that date is of today, I can't change that. You can modify the recorded medication to change the date if you choose to, because the script hasn't gone out. But when you go to set these up under the date field, it just as a mindset is when I go set these up, if I set them up for today, and then I want to refill those medications, if that's a chance that may happen, you can click on this start date and then go back a date, information that comes in, or if they actually knew the date that they started that medication, put that in there. That way then, when they go to refill the medications or you want to refill the medications in the med window, that date is not going to pop up and say, can't do it because it was entered in for today. So that's just a tip to be able to understand that before we could go in and change dates on that, on the template information, and you don't have that ability now as information comes through. But like I said, a record medication, you can modify that and change the date on that if you forget that pulls into it, but you do have that date function to be able to change that. All right, the SendRx screen. So there again is going through the beta process with this. The Worklist and the SendRx screen becomes the main focus of a lot of work on here. And so it's important to kind of understand the SendRx screen and know that they'll be spending a lot of time in that as it comes through. So as you've all seen before, we have a new icon called the SendRx. We have some new information, new patches that will be coming out probably by the time GA is. And we do have color coding to this ERX, so it'll be, if there's medications in that window for the provider when they log in, you're going to see a light here, just like we do on the messaging window, that shows that there's RX to be worked in there. So the RX work list contains all meds and DME that require further management to complete. So just keep that in your mind. It replaces the med refills formerly received in the inbox. So there again, everything moves into this. The change, RX change is an upcoming useful tool for pharmacies to electronically suggest change when needed. And I've got some screens in here to show that information. We also have right down below, the work list and the medication list work together with the status of the RX status. Information that pulls through. So in your medication window, we have an RX status here, verified, completed, and so forth. So what pulls into the work list is the incomplete, which I've broken that down for you so you can understand that better. We do have some new functionality coming out where we're going to have more information on this work list, or on the medication window, where they can see the date last refilled, denied will be coming into the RX status, which is a great change to be able to see. So if they deny a medication, we'll be able to see it in this window here, and the date last refilled, and the operator information will be coming back too to be able to see how that was filled out. So usually, basically, so the incomplete status happens when you go in and you hit renew or refill all buttons. It changes the medication to this incomplete status, and that pushes it up to the work list. So it's going to reside in both medication and the work list. And you have the ability to work them either or places. The medication window is going to be specific to the patient, and then the work list would be specific to the patient, but then you can work through a row of patients as they come onto it. It also gives you the ability to then go ahead and manage medications that are ready to be resent, multiple ones, like you see in below, information that pulls in, so they can work those all at once in that SendRx window versus, one at a time, information that pulls onto it. So just kind of understand that. Some tips to manage the work list. So this is where I kind of want to break down, as I said, is, when we went to beta, this is where a lot of the work goes on, and as well as a lot of the confusion and change. So basically the work list pulls into from the incomplete status, or you're going to have the electronic RX refills from the pharmacy that all come into this window. It breaks it down by provider, and then patient, and then medication. So you can see in this information here, when they're working that work list, a good thing is, when they come into it, you can see the last appointment, and then the next appointment would be go ahead and document in there. And at that point, a lot of times the provider may need to make that choice. Can I go ahead and work these medications from the work list? Is it going to be something simple I can just send out? Or if I'm going to, maybe at this point, I'm going to look at these medications, I'm going to drill it down, open that, and think, maybe I can go ahead and do it. All I have to do is click the Send RX window. If it's, and I don't want to say simple, but if it's just kind of a cut and dry type thing. But maybe they come into this and they look at it and they're like, I think I need to do a chart review. I need to open up my chart and decide what I need to do there. The best workflow on that, because what will happen is they get into the work list, they open up that window, they can't move around in it. They have to send it or cancel out. So if it's something that they look at the medications, they look at the appointments and kind of make that decision, if they just double click on the patient's name, it's going to go ahead and open up the chart. They can do their chart review in there, see what they're looking for, information that pulls on, and then from that window, all they need to do is go into the medication window, and my medications are sitting in there as incomplete information or the RX refill, if that's what I need, and I can go ahead and hit the Send RX from the medication window. The process can be working from both places. But I think from a perspective of me trying to decide, do I work everything here? Do I go back in? The important thing is to understand that I can go from the work list, or if I go into the chart, I can go ahead and process those medications from the chart, and then it's going to go ahead and update my work list in the background as well. And then I've had the access to be able to see the chart at the same time. So with this functionality, what I did was I kind of wanted to show you just the different types, because the Send RX window comes in, and it gives us options as to what we want to do, and it's really based on the type. So we have the RX refill comes in, and that's the type that's coming in from the pharmacy. That's the type of request we have. In-house refills, which would be something that the staff or somebody's done from the medication window. Patient calls in and wants to get their meds. They've gone into the medication window, and they've either hit renew or renew all, one or the other. But that's what's pushed those medications into the work list with a refill. If I've come into the medication window and I just hit new, and I wrote a new prescription, and I save it, just like what we're seeing right here, that then pushes back to the work list. So these are the types that they're going to see in the work list, or you're going to see in the work list, to be able to tell you what it is that needs to be done on that request and why it really happened, information that pulls into that, so you can distinguish which ones. And again, when you work in the work list as they come in, I may want to fill my in-house refills first and then go back to my ERX, depending on how they see things and what they want to do. So it's important for them to understand what they're seeing to be able to work that work list and get things prioritized. The other thing that you're going to see in this window is I call it the blue box, but it's basically if you got a medication, a refill comes in from the pharmacy, and it can't match up with what you have in the current medication information that pulls into it. So it pulls into the left, and it says a refill request, and then you have this drop-down box, and you have to go down through it to see if there's a medication, possibly a generic or something to that extent, or maybe it's a medication that you got a refill request for that you never even wrote, somehow it got to you. So you have a choice to be able to select that and match it up and then hit the proceed, and it's going to go through the same process and populate, or I can also deny it at the very top to deny the request. Once I deny the request here, it's going to come in, and I'll go ahead and hit proceed, and then the next window, the denial reason shows up. And then I have a long list of denial reasons, or I even have a custom deny reason as well. And that's the same process, so that when that window shows up, you can work them from that window, and it's going to go ahead and talk back to the system. But you will see this, and that's a lot of it when things don't match up the way it's looking for from the pharmacy. So it's a cross-reference to be able to go back and utilize that. The other thing with the SendRx screen, again under our field, we have adjust, delete, discontinue. This is the options you're going to see when it's like a refill type coming in-house. When they go in and they open up the SendRx window, I can do a refill type. The adjust allows for adjusting the signature dispense pharmacy quality refills. So that's what adjust is. It just opens up the existing prescription, allows you to adjust it. The delete removes it from the SendRx window, but does not remove it from the medication window. So when you delete it, if you delete something that comes in, it's still staying at the incomplete status on the medication window, and it's going to keep populating each time. So the delete option at this point is just giving you the ability to remove it from what you're processing now and maybe go back and grab it later. The discontinue will discontinue that medication. It pushes back to the medication window, and we'll update the medication window and push that medication over to the historical meds. And then obviously I can fill it, and then it's going to go ahead and push out electronically or whatever method if I've chosen to print it or send it electronic. A new type will show up to be able to either adjust, delete, or fill information that pulls in. So that's where that information is there. And then the SendRx, if I get a response coming in from the carrier, if I get one coming in from the clearinghouse, it's going to come in, or for the pharmacy, I have different options on here. So there again, I can adjust this information that pulls in. It maybe need to change it, information that pulls in. I also can replace it, which allows me to replace the current medication with a suggested alternative from the pharmacy. And I have a screen to show you here. Looks like we're getting down on time. Deny, discontinue, and approve information that pulls in. So I can deny it and send it back there, or I can approve it and just send it on its way out there depending on what I want. So the other thing, when I just brought this up, is in the SendRx. Once you get migrated, you're probably going to see a lot of things that come in with this red information here. There may be missing information that happened somewhere along the line in the database. For whatever reason, it's not matching up. So everybody's going to need to understand that when this is coming up, it's not matching exactly. When they have this information, they can come into here. It's going to be red, so it's not going to let you do anything until you do it. There's a little box here that says click here. And if you click that, or you click the adjust button right to the right, it's going to open up that medication, and you maybe need to adjust it or not even do anything. It's just by doing that, it's going to go ahead and match up with the medication in that FDB database to be able to allow them to send it on. But that's something that everybody needs to be aware of once you go to it, because it's going to happen just with different medications and certain things that have happened along the way. So here's some window information that comes on, just responding to RX information. I just documented information that pulls in. So this may be something that is going to, maybe you get an RX response that comes in requiring a product authorization. It's going to tell you this information below. It's going to come up in red, so I've got to do something with it. The change request is going to go ahead and be here to the right, information that shows through, and if it requires a prior authorization, I have to click that button. The window is going to pop up. I'm going to have to obtain that authorization from somewhere, carrier or something. So once I do, then I can go ahead and enter that information in that box and hit approve, and it's going to go ahead and prove it all the way down on that and send it out. Here's a replacement medication that, like I talked about earlier, is you may have a drop-down that says replace, and basically it's coming back from the pharmacy saying, this is the, Crestor is what we have on here, but the therapeutic information is different medication, which is what they're giving you, the suggested. You can approve it or deny it from here. You can replace it up above on that, or you could replace it, and then it's going to go ahead and let you manage it there as it comes in. It's just a message from the pharmacy. This is going to be, once I chose that replacement, this is the next window. It's going to go ahead. It's going to ask me which medication do I want from that drop-down list. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and then it's going to go ahead and populate back into my SendRx window, and then I could go ahead and I can approve it from below, or I can approve it up under my action window. So just request information that comes in. Deny and change RX request. This is another screen of it's going to come in. It's going to ask you if you want to change it or deny it. And they're sending a message back from the pharmacy. So a generic substitution information that pulls in, and you can deny that, or you can approve it as it goes on to it. You can also use this link right here to go in and see more of the original information that pulls on. So it's a lot of information coming back from the pharmacy, but it's the ability to see that information and that interaction between the EHR and now SureScripts. So this is the alternative medication that it's telling us that we can change it, you can select it, and move on. So those are documented in there. I will tell you that I have all of those up on the Engage Learning Center of those screens and all that information there to go back through it in a more of a live setting information that you can walk through. The view screen is also different. One thing again is, what I heard a lot is, how do I see where things were denied? How do I see what happened? We used to have a view screen here that you're looking at here that we could just view it. We couldn't do anything with it but view that prescription. Now we have, when you double click on something, it's going to open up, and this is the new screen that you have. And so you have, it'll tell you what was transmitted, when the date was, and so forth, the refills, information that comes in, and then there's more information that's right down in the right-hand corner, and if you click on that, that's going to show you denials and that kind of information that pulls through. So that view window does replace the other one and lets you see what's happening. All right, pharmacy administration, again, under my maintenance, tables, and pharmacies. This is what we were used to seeing. This is what we're going to see now. And when the new pharmacies come in, when you do the migration, your custom pharmacies, which would be the user-defined pharmacies that we had right down in here, the include user added, that's what those are called, not user-defined, include user added. Those will come into the new system. If you don't want them, you can remove them if they're not associated with anybody, but all your providers, all your patients with their pharmacies inside of their chart will go ahead and come over to it and into this new format. The little pills on the right-hand side, the gold, when you hover your mouse over it, you'll be able to see what that pharmacy has the capability of doing. Sending, replacing, all that good stuff we talked about. This is where that pharmacy that'll give you that information that has the ability to do it. You also have the ability, again, with the pharmacy management, we have a patient tab, we have a clinic tab, and we have the SureScripts directory. So the clinic tab is where, like a lot of those user pharmacies will come into once you do the migration. You can use those. Keep in mind, if you've used a lot of nicknames, they don't migrate over. So that's something that you'll have to have on your list if you're doing it, to go back in and get them re-nicknamed so that you can identify the difference between certain pharmacies come into it as they pull through, but your SureScript information will pull into it and you can add it. All right. I talked really fast over there in the last 10 minutes and I apologize. But these are the new upcoming Lunch and Learns. I hope on the April 3rd, I want to work with Dave and Bob, and hopefully we can do what we really want to do is just do a breakdown of the installation and get kind of technical on that so that you guys can understand that. And then on the 17th, we're going to do an UpDocs review. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up because people will be moving towards that area there. And we're right at the time information. I don't know if somebody, if there's any questions or not. If not, I'll go ahead and turn it to Cameron, and you guys can email me questions if you need to go ahead and email those out, and I'll get back to them, or if there was questions that the panel couldn't answer. Cameron?
Thank you, Susie. Great presentation. I know that it went the entire, 59 minutes of the hour today, so that's great. We don't see any questions, so we'll go ahead and conclude this webinar for today. Like Susie said, if you have any questions, you can reach out to her directly, and she'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you for another great presentation on enterprise prescribing, and hopefully everybody got great benefit from this Lunch and Learn today, so thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.